excelența sa, Valery Kuzmin, ambasadorul Federației Ruse. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, dear friends and colleagues. We welcome you in the Embassy of the Russian Federation in Bucharest.
Thank you. First questions would be about very hot topic for us today, the price of gas in Europe. So how is it the price in Europe influenced by Russia actually? Because everybody is accusing Russia for increasing the price.
I can't agree with your last assumption. Not everybody blames Russia. I can quote numerous statements of, for example, German politicians and others, and even, if I'm not mistaken, it was Ursula von der Leyen, the chairman, the president of the European Commission, who once squeezed out of her a statement that Gazprom complies with all its commitment in supplies of the gas to European market. You're right that it is rather urgent, rather acute, burning question for Europe because a great number of European households will have to pay higher price for that gas and for electricity as a result. What can we tell in this regard? President Putin used a different comparison, but I'll bring you another one, the simplest. The situation in the gas market in Europe is defined by the laws of free market. This was decision of the European Union in the first place. They invented one after another 3 energy packages and so on and so forth, limiting activities of Russian corporations, but bringing the whole Europe to the spot market somewhere, Rotterdam Plus or somewhere there. As a result, this season, there emerged a situation when a number of factors combining together brought the prices to grow, to surge up like in pandemic, the waves of pandemic of COVID. Why? Because you know that pandemic led to a depression and recession in many economies of the world. And this, the process of recovery started earlier in the Far East. As a result, demand for natural gas there has increased enormously and in relatively short time. As a result, in free market like this Rotterdam Plus, immediately it influenced towards the uprising trend in the prices. Why? Because evidently the global suppliers, and there are not so many, in fact, the United States of America, first of all, with its liquefied shale gas, which is, by the way, very dirty in terms of ecology. Not only for destruction of soil and underneath layers of the earth, but as well as for further use of it. Okay. And Gulf states in particular, in the first place, Qatar, which is the major liquefied gas producer on the global market. They turned their gas holding ships towards the Far East. Not only China, to Indonesia, other countries, and so on and so forth. As a result, here, the supply decreased. And that added to the factors encouraging the increase of gas price and as a chain of electricity supplies and so on and so forth. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, as a result of that strategic decision of the European Union, which I have mentioned at the beginning, many countries have rejected or after expiry, they didn't resume long-term contracts for supply contracts with Gazprom. Not all of them. Very recently, Hungary, for example, resumed such a long-term contract, as well as Moldova, after certain difficult negotiation process. But it resumed. Why? Because that very formula of pricing gas proved to be through half a century. Russian gas started to reach Western Europe in the late 60s, about half a century ago, late 60s or the 20th century. And there was invented a formula that gas is a specific good, merchandise. It is not, I don't know, even a loaf of bread, which as well needs certain conditions of preservation, for example, and expiry dates and so on. Gas is, you should, first of all, you should have capacity to produce it. Then you should have capacity to store it somewhere. It can't be stored even like fuel. You remember last spring when oil went down and kicked the floor, as we call it, yes? The floor of the price. You had to pay for the consumer for his one's concession, one's readiness to accept oil. Oil was abundant everywhere. Nevertheless, you can have a plastic, I don't know, what is it, canister, small vessel, and you can keep oil there. All tankers were used and so on and so on. Yes, it is different. You can't keep it everywhere. You can keep it only in some places. As a result, the long-term planning is essential. And it is essential not only technologically, but in the sense of investment. Gas company should know that this volume of consumption, this volume of demand is more or less guaranteed, and it invests into exploration, into preparation of underground capacities to storing capacities and so on and so forth. And there was a formula linked to the oil price. Oil price was more or less stable. And with the so-called lag of 6 months, for example, now we're in the second half of the 2021. And oil price, average oil price, for example, is in the roundabouts of $81 per barrel, yes? So it was calculated, and next 6 months, the gas price would be linked to the price of this second half of the 2021. It is not perfect, of course, but it was much more predictable and much more reliable in the terms of production and marketing of such a specific good as gas. So these are the factors, objective factors. Who is to blame for that change in the European strategy, for that quicker, faster recovery of the Far East, for that COVID and so on? It is objective. They are all objective factors that play in the market. We have suffered once when Soviet Union was suffering through a period I call Catastroika, after one of the Russian immigrant philosophers, Zinoviev. He developed this term, catastrophe plus perestroika, made Catastroika. When we were living through the last years of Catastroika, there was widespread illusion that free market will come and this invisible hand of free market will settle all the problems. And another illusion was that you don't need to do anything. Just give full freedom to that invisible market hand and you can just enjoy yourself. Yes, it is another thing. So nowadays we see the same situation which was produced by objective factors. I haven't even mentioned about the Nord Stream 2. Which was to become operational by December 2019, before pandemic. Capacity of this new gas pipeline is about 55 billion cubic meters, as far as I remember, at least. Maybe one pipe, because it is it contains two pipes, two parallel pipes. Nevertheless, about 55 for sure. You can check it in statistics. And the deficit of the practical deficit of the supplies of natural gas in Europe is about 8-10 billion cubic meters at most for the moment. I missed another relatively minor but substantial, of course, factor when production of natural gas here in Europe has started to gradually decrease because of deposits were gradually exhausted. It is a natural process. Nobody can do anything about it. For example, in the Netherlands and Belgium, they stopped production of shale gas because production of shale gas is anti-environmental adventure, to put it mildly, or even crime, if you like, or even crime. So gradually the overall production around Europe has decreased. Romania hasn't emerged as a major gas producer. Question not to me. So in the comprehensive, if you like, this big comprehensive number of factors played in one direction, unfortunately, for the prices of gas in European market. So without brushing away any Nord Stream 2, Nord Stream 3, by the way, it is a commercial project launched by 6 West European corporations from France, from Germany, from Austria, I can't recollect everybody, yes? And Gazprom on the other side. It is a collective venture, a commercial one. So, in Russia, there is a saying, when, как будет озорной мальчик, not very disciplined boy, trying to harm at least nerves of his mother, rejects to wear a warm hat in the wintertime and says, "Oh, that mom, I'm going to take my revenge and I get my ass frozen." This is the tactic of European Commission and, if you like, of European Union on the whole. It looks like that. It is not an accusation, it is just a statement of the real situation. So, when, and even without Nord Stream 2, Gazprom has undertaken all the steps to increase supplies. But what does it mean, increase of supplies? That means that there should emerge new contracts. Or do you believe that it should be something like welfare, charity practice on behalf of Gazprom? I can't recollect any step of this kind on behalf of the European Union. And you know that international affairs, they are based on the reciprocity principle. Reciprocity. So, otherwise, according to the direct instruction from President Putin, the gas underneath, under earth stores, how they are properly named, I don't know. Caves, in fact, they are. So they are now filled better. All other needs that emerged, they were met, more or less. New contracts were signed with Serbia, with Hungary, with Moldova. If anything emerges of this sort in future, we'll deal with it. In Romania as well, we state that in view of such a situation, imagine in the European continental market, relevant Romanian corporations, institutions, they have increased purchases of Russian gas, and in percentage, Romania even was leading for some time with some 314% compared to the last year, but it of course depends on the starting level. Starting level relatively low, and it is calculated from that low level on the bilateral basis, not a general volume. But nevertheless, the trend is evident, and it is only natural. All the speculations that Russia is using, you see, if half a century is not enough for you to understand that Russian state, Russian Gazprom, Russian economy, Russian nation is not interested in any subversive activities against reliable, predictable consumer of our goods. Why? Because we are looking for trade. Trade is the basis of peace, and it is the basis for earning money to buy other goods. And this formula has been operational and effectively operational for decades between us and Europe. So who is interested in breaking that practice? Think it over. Maybe in principle it is enough to say this, but in general there is one anecdotic episode that I can bring to your attention for illustration of the situation. I can't, frankly, tell the full official name of this Polish National Gas Corporation, which is in charge of distribution, transportation of gas. About a year and a half ago, that corporation revolted, mutineered against those long-term gas contracts with Gazprom, and insisted through the court, that free market, I don't know to what extent, free market factor should be introduced in that long-term agreement, long-term contract, operational since last century, since 1996, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was signed for a quarter of a century, I don't know, maybe. And now it insists that Gazprom should either went back to that former practice or either in any way decrease the price of the supplied gas against that made on the basis of concession on behalf of Gazprom, so to say, retreat from the principle of the long-term contracts, as I have explained to you, linking the price of gas to price of oil. It is not a perfect remedy, but it stabilizes market. You see, when every sphere is fluctuating like that, if they are slightly linked, it makes them more stable.
This gives predictability.
So, and I believe that if they, I don't know what is the position of Gazprom, I haven't heard anything. I believe they didn't react immediately, but I believe that for Gazprom, the best way will be to ignore this demand, because I'm sorry, it is ridiculous to behave oneself like that. If you are a serious politician, a serious businessman planning, it is called horizon of planning in business. In gas producing branch of industry, I've explained to you, horizon of investment horizon of business, of planning, should be rather far. Otherwise, you can't be effective, because everywhere resources of gas in Russia as well are limited to a certain extent. We need to make more discoveries, more deposits to be found, to be equipped and so on. So it needs money, it needs time, it needs planning, and more or less predictability of the market. Reasonable predictability. This is our logic. Are you satisfied?
Yes.
Okay, please. Another question.
We would like to ask you about the actual crisis in Belarus, and more exactly from the border, from Belarus to Poland. We see that the immigrants are rejected to enter in the European Union, but it's interesting that a few years ago we remember that the attitude was the immigrants are welcome. It's a humanitarian attitude to help the poor people from Middle East or other areas. And an interesting point is how did these immigrants get in Belarus? I mean, if you can make a clarification of
Yes, I can. This is the last part of your question is easy to answer, and it is, you are right, it is largely ignored by the Western mass media. Belarus, which is part of the so-called allied союзное государство, allied state with Russian Federation. Relevant treaty was signed back last century in the midst of the reign of Boris Yeltsin in Russia. And Lukashenko stays as Belarusian leader all this period of time. It was a far-reaching treaty. For example, compared to the European Union at that time, remember what was Europe? There was no, in fact, full-fledged European Union by that time. Compared to the modern European Union, which has made already a step or a couple of steps ahead in integration, it was very far-reaching document. But, for example, with united or single currency and so on and so forth. But later, the implementation took some time, and according to the agreement between the leaders, presidents of two countries, at that time it was Yeltsin, later it became Putin, then Medvedev, and once more Putin, and Lukashenko, they got to an understanding that they need to prove pudding through eating. That means focus on economics, focus on coordination of different spheres of customs policies, border policies, and so on. One of the points of controversy in the border policies was the regime of entering the country. And till now, not all the questions which are supposed to be fully agreed and coordinated between the allied states are coordinated and agreed upon with Belarus. Why? Because Belarusian government, in particular, being oriented or maybe misoriented by the values and beacons of the European values and targets of development of the European Union, it tried to pursue the most possibly wide policy of open doors. And Belarus has agreements, bilateral agreements with about 100 states on the earth. That means 1/2 of the United Nations membership of visa-free entry. I can't speak for Belarusian government, believe me, though it looks, why not? Tourists are coming, leaving some money, or God knows what, using Belarus as transit country as well, why not? So, this is a fact which is widely ignored by the Western community in this particular case. What happened this, I would say, autumn, maybe late summer, as far as I can judge, it started early autumn, about 2 months ago, in substantial numbers. Those migrants or refugees, it depends on you. Anyway, you are right that international humanitarian law dictates that such people should be treated in a humane way. Their needs, in particular for medical assistance, for food supplies and all, should be respected. In any case, in what situation, in whatever situation they find themselves, as people of this with this status, they are supposed to be helped and enjoy sympathy of the international community. Now, we know that in some countries of the Middle East, and in particular in Syria, Iraq, to a certain extent Afghanistan and others, there was launched a campaign by whom, believe me, not by Belarusians, not by Russians. By the way, for you to forget about Russian hand in it, I can tell you that global statistics shows evidently and indisputably that the largest hosting immigrants countries of the world are United States of America and Russian Federation. I'm not speaking for the United States of America. You see from time to time situation on the Mexican border and elsewhere. In Russian Federation, it's all the same. Either from Central Asia, either from Ukraine, running from that civil conflict, civil war in fact, launched by Kiev. millions of people emigrated to Russia, and it had to absorb them. Have you heard anything about hundreds of thousands of migrants, or whatever you call them, refugees, amassing along the border, suffering from cold? Have you heard anything? No. So this is the natural. About American border, I'm not telling you. Ask American.
So they are welcome.
So yeah, they are welcome, yes, with clubs, whips from Kansas Rangers, and so on. Not to me, don't ask me about America. I am telling you, in this particular case. And as a result, some people started to arrive to Belarus. By what means? Turkish Airways, Iraqi Airways, and other airways. Nothing to do with the Aeroflot at all. Whether it was Belarus involved, I can't say for sure. Maybe partially involved Belarus, but it operated on the basis of Belarusian laws. No visa. People asking for tourist visa if it is needed in one of those cases. Unfortunately, I can state that I don't know why such a campaign started relatively recently, not a half a year ago or a year ago, but I can say that most of them who are now amassing on the border of Poland and Belarus, they are arriving from the, so to say, crisis zones or even war zones. Not in every city where they are coming from there is a war, but there have been a war recently, or the threat of military conflict, all kind of hostilities is, you see, so clear and renewable in those regions. You maybe have heard that most of them, they are Kurds. Kurdish nation, it is one of the major victims of global politics during the recent century and a half. It is major nation, living everywhere. I am starting from the smallest communities, in Armenia, for example, modern Armenia, in Azerbaijan, in Iran, in Iraq, in Turkey, the most massive, in Syria, everywhere. It is divided nation in many ways, and you know the policy of our Turkish friends. It was Atatürk who declared that in Turkey there are no minorities, there are only Turks. So he denies them the right even to be named by their own name, you see. And the situation is always tense there. Turkey sometimes quite rightfully accuses Kurdish radical organization in using terroristic methods of to prove their case and so on and so forth. It is okay, but nevertheless, it is a tense situation, and it is not incidentally, not because of the ill will of Belarusian leader, President Lukashenko, that those people were very easily disoriented by Western commercial advertisement and propaganda, in fact. Because what is the presentation of European Union of itself all over the world? It is a paradise. It is a place where you'll be happy. Everything is okay. And evidently the relatively recent precedent when it was millions of immigrants passing through Turkey in particular, absorbed in Western Europe, in particular in Germany, these people on the Belarusian-Polish border, they are asked by journalists only on the side of the Belarusian border, because Polish authorities deny journalists the right to report from that border region. They are speaking, we are looking for Germany. We have, some of their relatives are living already there. Remember what happened at that time? European Union rushed to the Turkish leadership to negotiate solution, and good money, maybe not in full, I don't know. I'm not a chief accountant in this regard. Good money was offered. Special camps were arranged so that major part of those Syrian refugees at that time stayed in the Turkish territory. But nevertheless, you can't deny that migrants or refugees, and sometimes it is difficult sometimes to distinguish at the beginning. Later you can maybe find the nuances and made up your mind properly, but they are coming through Morocco, they are coming through Libya, they are coming through Mediterranean in general. Mr. Salvini, former interior minister of Italy, now is facing court procedure, trial at the court for preventing some ship passengers, migrants from Africa, to land on, in one or two cases. Why, in fact? There are many such vessels, not only ships, but I don't know, these, rubber boats, which are very, very fragile vessels to cross even Mediterranean. Mediterranean is a big sea. Because in this case, charity Spanish organization was involved as an owner of that ship. And it is now a court procedure launched. But what is the logic? Polish authorities are now only praised for defending the outside borders or the exterior borders of the European Union. Is it a major shift in European policy and strategy? Tell me, please. So, otherwise, we know, thanks God, that quite recently, yesterday, there was a series of telephone conversations between President Putin and acting Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel. They agreed upon major issue that those migrants or refugees, you like to call them, they need humanitarian assistance. And this assistance is not hampered by Belarusian authorities, by the way. International Red Cross is working openly and rather effectively, providing them with some shelter there, because it is freezing temperature. Imagine yourself, if it is +2 in the midday, in the night time it would be -2 at least. Indeed. In the forest, in the open air, with some pregnant women, with small children, and so on and so forth. It is a disaster, in fact, a humanitarian disaster. So, Angela Merkel, to the best of my knowledge, as well contacted Mr. Lukashenko, because European Union before had preferred to play political games, trying to contact opposition leader of Belarus, Madame Tikhanovskaya, who once upon a time openly said that, well, I have the skills of producing good pyrashki pies, to bake good pies, or I don't know, kotlets in the meaning of Russia and Belarus, it is not a meat, but it is a minced meat. Hamburgers, like something like hamburgers, properly said, named in English, and so on and so forth. So, she said, I'm following attentively situation on the border. Finally, pragmatism has made its way to the reality, and I hope that there will be gradually, this crisis will be gradually diffused and gradually solved. But there is no way but humanitarian attitudes and behavior of the Polish border police. They amassed more than 2 divisions of the military, not only border police or border guards, believe me. And they were using, even CNN correspondent, who was widely covered by BBC, for example, today in the morning newsreels, suffered from that water cannons. According to European law, it is forbidden to use water cannons under +10 temperature of the air, under +10. It is +2 at most, so it is freezing. It was very cruel Nazi torture. One of the Soviet generals, General Karbashev, who was an engineer, who was not a commissar, who was in the engineering troops of Soviet army. He was imprisoned. He was at first pressured psychologically, later by other means, to change sides, to become a traitor. He denied, and in the final round he was put in the open space, and there were no water cannons at that time. But they poured water on him, and he became a nice statue. It is a well-known episode. So I can't have any other comparisons, unfortunately, in this particular situation. That is why I hope that it will be overcome, this crisis. But this crisis as well reflects one of the new realities of our world, that a real troublemaker, sometimes claiming to be a winning power in conflicts, is very unwilling to bear any responsibilities for the consequences. You see? Because Iraq and Syria were undermined and blown up, not by their own. We know very well how it happened. And there were many consequences, including Islamic State and so on and so forth. And those migrants, Kurds as well, they were, if you like, fascinated by all kind of commercials and purely political propaganda reaching them. It is a fact, you see.
Sorry, in my question I wanted to underline the double standards that are used by the European Union.
I agree with you.
I made this comparison.
Yes, I understand you. That is why I sincerely hope that it will be diffused and settled more or less in an acceptable way, though we know that by now already some people have died there.
I think the crisis is used in a political way.
Of course. Unfortunately, we see it. So this is our life.
Yeah. The last question.
Yeah, you.
Yes, we would like also to ask you about the situation in Afghanistan. The American troops suddenly withdraw from Afghanistan. The previous administration in Afghanistan was supported by US, and now,
NATO.
In opinion of many,
including Romania,
NLS, yes. In Afghanistan, the situation is pretty chaotic. How do you see?
You know very well that it is already very much said and explained about post-American Afghanistan. I would bring you only one estimation, one evaluation brought by President Putin, and some small comment to this point. First of all, Putin said, besides all those accounts that whether it was a defeat, shameful retreat and so on, no. The major point is that 20 years of American or NATO occupation of Afghanistan proved a simple truth, a simple thing, that from outside, foreign intervention, foreign pressure, foreign occupation, foreign violence can't impose on a nation new way of life or democracy, like in the West they like to speak about democracy. By the end, incidentally, Americans dropped that point from the agenda. They said, we have never had any intention to build democracy in Afghanistan. Though from the start and for about 18, 19 years they said that they were promoting democracy in Afghanistan. So outside foreign intervention is doomed to fail in such situation. And it doesn't mean that only military intervention, but other ways of intervention as well. We know very well that recently we have lived through a long period of so-called color revolutions. Orange revolutions, tulip revolutions, revolution of rose, revolutions of Lebanese cedar, and so on and so forth. All of them, with no exception. Look what is going on in Lebanon, for example, in Ukraine, everywhere. It led only to deterioration, to further crisis, and to all kinds of contradictions. And the rank and file, man in the street, is the major victim of all those experiments. That is why our president presents as a philosophical, if you like, pivot, philosophical core of the pragmatic policy in our days, reasonable, healthy, moderate conservatism. That means you should be reasonable everywhere. You should reject from the beginning any radical means of settlement of, in particular, military means of solution, and so on and so on. This is an illustration of that. And unfortunately now, Americans that have indeed, I'm not going so deep as to prove or refuse the information that, for example, Osama bin Laden, who was at the origin of American intervention there, he was found in Pakistan, by the way. Was it really the true reason for that invasion? Let us put aside all those aspects, we have no time for it. But this is very important to understand, that now America tries to put the burden of the consequences on the neighboring country and on the international community, which is unacceptable. Of course, we, as members of Organization of the Treaty for Collective Security, it is called, we are alarmed, we are concerned with the threat of dissemination of terrorist groups, of narco traffic, so-called, yes, drugs traffic. And Afghanistan, during those 20 years of American domination, became the major producer of so-called hard narcotics like, heroin. Mm-hmm. It now, since till recently, I don't know the figures by the end of this year, whether they will change or not. I don't believe that they will change drastically. Was supply of 90% of heroin to the world markets, and in particular to the market of Europe and Russia as well.
Under US occupation.
Under US occupation, yes. And there are researchers originating from American special services. I can't recollect for the moment the name of a person who have already wrote a book about how American secret services covered up, facilitated, and sometimes maybe even administered the networks of those drug transportation routes, marketing networks, and so on and so forth, through different ways, not only towards Europe directly, but in the direction of the Southeast Asia as well. So it is very alarming and very unhappy situation that we face now there. Otherwise, we'll live, we'll see. We hope that Afghani people, which is as well, you know, multinational, multi-ethnic society with no outright majority, the Beluja, if I'm not mistaken, yes, population is about 40-45%, not more. Other groups are, many of them, they will find some accommodation because it needs sustainable domestic solution of this political crisis and turmoil in the state of which Americans left this country, killing before clamping the door finally, a peaceful family of 10, about a dozen people who, with the father looking for potable water as the leader of that family, but the whole car with about 10 or 12 people was blown up. And the Americans said, well, we didn't breach any law, we are ready to pay compensation. Nevertheless,
do you think this is a sign of decreasing of American hegemony, or maybe they want to redistribute their armies towards China, because we know that there are tensions with Taiwan?
Well,
maybe it's a complex question.
I can tell you that these questions you should better address to American chargé d'affaires or future ambassador as soon as he arrives to Bucharest. But you are right in the sense that, of course, America, for different reasons, was not ready to continue that occupation for different reasons. Proceeding from domestic political conflicts and struggle that is going on there. Though in this particular case it was Trump who launched the idea of accelerating the process of evacuation. But nevertheless, he failed to complete that process. It was already new administration that withdrew the last soldier from there. Evidently, that former leaders of the Western world claiming global domination, they are losing power, losing the capacities and resources to, if you like, secure that domination, that hegemony. It is a fact, but now I have answered to this question in one of the previously formulated by you points. We are looking for, and we objectively acknowledge that new multipolar or manipolar, we'll see, new global order is emerging. But we shouldn't allow this global order to emerge like, for example, future, hopefully, domestic political reconciliation in Afghanistan, that means in a chaotic way. We believe that we have a solid basis. It is generally acceptable norms of the international law. And on the basis of those norms, we have an operational universal forum. There is no better universal forum in the world. It is United Nations organization. And we have launched, as diplomatic service, we have launched a hashtag which says, our rules is UN Charter. Why? Because on this basis, we have good hope and good chances to work out. It is not an overnight operation. It is not enough to, send paratroopers here or there. It needs collective effort of the whole mankind. Of course, different nations, different states, they have different degree of interest in this or that topic, but generally, UN is a universal forum. And open, so-called open working committees that are formed, for example, were formed recently in the sphere of cyber security. These are the adequate platforms to work out mutually acceptable and effective decisions. A couple of days ago, there was a big scandalous sensation launched in America when our missile destroyed one of the former old, I believe still Soviet satellites.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh God! A catastrophe. And it was launched, this scandal was encouraged in America, which has done a number of times such operations. And it was not only United States, it was People's China, it was India already as well. They say, I'm not a big expert, military experts say that our strike was more accurate in many ways. And it poses no danger at all to the surrounding, so to say, space traffic. Though we can't forget that it was the United States that last year, I believe, or last but one year, they declared creation of their special outer space military command.
New branch.
Yes, they declared outer space an eventual war theater or military actions or military activities theater, and so on and so forth. They formulated this as if it is a kind of a response to development and harnessing in Russia of new hypersonic weapons, substantially superseding all the available means of delivery of the mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction available in America. Well, we have prepared our reaction, but the irony is that our particular action doesn't breach any operational international laws or norms. We, together with People China, by the way, in this particular topic, we are promoting in the United Nations a set of new documents which would prevent deployment, first deployment. So it is supposed to be a convention which forbids that any nation deploys first weapons in the outer space. Prevention of arms race and all these initiatives, they stay unanswered without adequate response on behalf of the West. They say, okay, we are going to provide you with the rules. What rules? Why should we expect somebody to prepare some rules without our participation? We don't believe, we don't trust it. This politics, we have already lost those illusions. I have mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about late Catastroika illusions in Russia. And we remember very well that Soviet Union was not defeated in the Cold War. Soviet people, maybe a little bit naively, maybe because of not so shrewd and visionary leaders, they decided that it is feasible to withdraw from that war peacefully. All our hopes by now have been deceived and destroyed by the Western attitudes. Because we withdrew our troops from Europe peacefully, all the post-Soviet republics got their independence peacefully, politically. There was no guerrilla war. Whatever you listen about resistance in the Baltic republics, forget it. Yes, Forest Brothers, after the war, they were there. Afterwards, they either were exterminated or they found refuge somewhere in Canada and America. And later, re-immigrated and now are claiming that they are so free, freedom fighters.
If I remember correctly, in 91 was a referendum for the preservation of...
yes, there was a referendum in
Soyuz.
March 1991,
Yes, mm-hmm.
And some of the republics, including, by the way, Moldova, which is of interest, special interest for you, the Republican, as we called them at that time, Republican authorities, they called for boycott of that referendum. Not in Transnistria. In Transnistria it was held. Some other republics, in Transcaucasian republics like Armenia, if I'm not mistaken. But nevertheless, the overall result was over 70%
Yes.
in favor of preserving Soviet Union in a more democratized form. And a negotiation process was going on. Those three leaders of the Slavic republics, by the way, they were, in fact, high treason criminals. They breached all the laws of the Soviet Union, formally. What took place later, we know. at one day, I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, exactly a Catholic Christmas, when Gorbachev just left his office and ordered that Soviet flag be put down over the Kremlin. And it was finished, you see. But, so as a result, nevertheless, we have many such situations in history. Some of them are more clear, some of them are less clear. Like I remember the story that Declaration of Independence of Moldova, the original text was lost and never recovered. I can bring some consolation to your souls. The same situation is with the original text of that Belaverskaya Pushchi declaration, when Yeltsin, Kravchuk and Shushkevich, leaders of Belarus, Ukraine and Russia, got together in Belarusian forest. No, it is very, very, what is it? Заколдованные. What is it? Cursed. Some mysterious cursed place. So they got together and they signed a document, declaration for creation of this Commonwealth of Independent States, which now exists, and the only aspect that was realized more or less in full was the creation of free trade zone. And even when Georgia left CIS, they claimed that two-thirds, if not more, of the accords and agreements, conventions, linking them to the space of the CIS stay operational, in spite of them leaving with a scandal the CIS as a state. So, and they say, the eyewitnesses, they were eyewitnesses, they say that in that document some things were, as well as I mentioned to you about Russian-Belarusian Union Treaty, they were very far-reaching and never came into reality, never carried out those provisions. Other situations are much more transparent. For example, illegal coup d'etat in the center of Kiev, which was called Maidan, with flagrant, with arrogant support of American embassy, when big containers with small denomination dollars were imported there to subsidize activists of Maidan and so on and so on. Everything is known. You don't want to learn about it. It is different stories. In Europe, they don't want to learn about it. And now, every move of our armed forces in our national territory, even in the Far East, produces a kind of a sensation in the West. But like it was last spring, it was Kiev's army concentrating around Donbass region, shelling activated, all kind of provocation launched, and civilians suffering from it. Now when you listen to the declarations of Russia is to blame for those 15,000 Ukrainian citizens, it was Ukrainian army, 95%. Even OSCE monitoring mission report, the recent one, says that for some recent period of time there was a special agreement on a comprehensive and profound ceasefire. 3/4, about 70% of civilian deaths were on the side of the Donbass republics. Why? Because they are shelling indiscriminately and intendedly the sites of civilian strategic infrastructure like water supply, power stations, coal mines, and so on and so forth. And Europe is applauding. Where is the reason? In this way, you can't find no sustainable solution for any conflict or civil war in this particular case. That's it. That is why population of Ukraine decreased by, at minimum estimation, by 10-12 million people. Some of them ran away to Russia. Some of them are moving to Poland, and so on.
Yes.
As a result, when they speak that, for example, Mr. Zelensky was elected by 73% of the vote, that was 73% of half of the Ukrainian electorate of the post-Soviet, immediate post-Soviet era. When they say it was about 50 and something million inhabitants in Ukraine. This is the best, if you like, criteria. You can't find it. If people are running away, are they happy?
We understand very well because in Romania it's pretty the same.
Well, about Romania,
from a point of view.
about Romania, it is not the topic of our today's. I believe we have already abused our time, but I hope that it will be interesting for you. Otherwise, other philosophic questions, some of them, I tried to answer. But the problem is that, in particular, problem of communication is the worst, so to say, factor that is spoiling many good intentions, many good wishes, you see. And it is not incidental problem. It is not by chance that it exists and prevents us from better understanding each other. It is a part of war propaganda, because the collective West, as we sometimes call it, in particular in Russian politology, this term has already established itself. Collective West has more or less evidently, outspokenly, has turned their course towards confrontation and even possibly some armed conflict with Russia. Why? Starting from that very point of withdrawing Soviet troops from Central Europe, from everywhere, and now we have now a new map here. Before there was a better map where I drew the border of Warsaw Pact organization, how it went through Europe, and where is now Russian border. And now we are denied the right, the sovereign right to move our troops inside of Russia border. We don't care about your concerns and sentiment in this regard.
And
it is our sovereign right.
More and more.
In the Black Sea, for example, it is all the same. We are blamed for super weaponization, militarization. The only thing that happened in the Black Sea was that we established effective A2AD sphere. That means anti-air defense, anti-air access denial. That means our means of
security,
our means of all kinds of defense, air defense, terrestrial, naval, airborne. They effectively are able to defend Crimean, for example, peninsula, Caucasian coast from outside assault. And this infuriates the West, infuriates NATO. Why? Because it wants to be dominating. What for? I'm sorry. What for?
Maybe for
imagine that, for example, Russian Navy, together with Cuban Navy, Venezuelan Navy, launches exercises and training with fire, with live munition fire in the Mexican Gulf, in the Gulf of Mexico, near Florida.
Huge scandal.
Near Florida. Scandal? It will be another Caribbean crisis.
Oh.
Yeah.
With, the world will reach the brink of the global catastrophe, global nuclear and all other weapons of mutual destruction crisis and war. So, and by chance, America, speaking a lot about territorial waters of Russia, is not a member of the Universal Convention on the Law of the Seas. You know it. I remember I was starting my career as diplomat in Libya, and one of my topics to be supervised was position of Libyan Republic at first, and later it became Jamahiriya, on the law and law of the seas negotiation process. It was a long process for about 10 years going in the late 70s, early 80s last century. And finally it was a convention site, including definitions of territorial waters, some inner waters like Azov Sea, for example, and other things. America is not a member of this convention. I don't know whether it didn't sign, but for sure I know that it hasn't ratified it. It is for sure. And it's teaching us about the law of the seas. So, my dear friends, thank you for coming.
Thank you for
We thank you for the interview.
And hopefully you'll follow your strategy of curiosity, because curiosity opens many interesting things to any person. And if you are not a biased partisan
This is the purpose.
person, you'll find many things very interesting, believe me.
Thank you very much.